What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to bring to you part 2 of the Spike Brothers Premium In-Depth Guide. Sorry this has been a little bit delayed. I've been a little bit sick. The past couple weeks I've been feeling pretty under the weather and wasn't really able to get a good recording in just due to coughing and sneezing and all that stuff. I didn't want to make the video too awkward to listen to. But let's go ahead and start out with this. Today we're going over grade 0s and 1s, so let's hop into it. So starting off, we have our starters. I've got 3 starters here. Mecha Trainer, Mecha Analyzer, and Running Sniper. All of these are useful in different situations. So, Mecha Trainer you're wanting to play if you're playing a Hell Hard 8 build, or if you're playing a deck that wants to get a hold of a specific grade 1 or 0 that is really crucial to a deck. So if you're building a deck which is based around like a special combo, which you're trying to base around a grade 1, you can run less of that, run Mecha Trainer as your starter, and have a consistent way to always see it. Now, Mecha Analyzer is more for these extremely aggressive decks that want to try and kill on first stride. You're going to give up all your resources just to try and kill them. You're able to use on-call skills like Gyro Slinger or Spike Bouncer to abuse with Mecha Analyzer as well as Mecha Instructor. They have the same skill, so you can get off a bunch of calls with that. And then the most consistent starter, I believe, is Running Sniper. You just draw your card, it's a V starter. Everybody knows the power of V starters. Now, the reason we have to go over all the starters is they're all really kind of dedicated to a certain build. So when you see a starter here and you think, okay, what does my deck do and what do I want my deck to start out with? So I can go with Mecha Analyzer if my deck is, again, extremely aggressive. I want to be using it to get a bunch of on-call skills, try and spike my opponent out of the game. Whereas you're going with a more traditional build, which wants to get to maybe second stride, or maybe wants to see a couple more combo pieces, you want to go into Running Sniper. And Mecha Trainer is obviously for playing Hell Hard 8, you can search for the Heal Guardians, or if you have a very specific combo you need to do with a grade 1, you could use it if you maybe have access to a couple more counter blasts. Overall, there's a lot of variety in our starter lineup, and it's not just like V-Starter lol. On to triggers. Now, I have the triggers up that are most used. These are the most like vanilla triggers that you use. So you have draw PGs, you have your stride crits, heal guards, you have the soul crits, and then you have normal draw triggers. Hell Hard 8 usually wants to run draw triggers because you want to see a lot of cards. Now, the draw triggers will turn into the plus 5k shield draw triggers when the set 4 of Overdress gets released, but I think it's still important to talk about the draw triggers. Now, personally, I use normally 4 draw PGs, 4 stride crits, 4 heal guards, and then an over trigger plus 3 of a different type of trigger we'll get into when we go into our next triggers with the effect triggers. Now, over triggers, typically you want to be using Alberia just because getting extra 100 million is so devastating on your stride turns, but Galgamaheld, whatever his name is, I can never say it right in any of my videos, but it's still a very good card, especially with the Greedon coming into Spike Brothers. It's going to be a very impactful card if you're going to be running a deck that has Greedon as a win con or has Greedon as a side con, because getting the extra 10k to crit throughout the rest of the game is just very, very strong. Overall, I think both of them are valid options. It's just my personal preference. I like Alberia, but again, the Dark States over trigger is still an extremely good card. Now, effect triggers. I'm going to start with the Dudley Shears Lindsay. This is your G-Guard for GB8. You just search a ball out of your deck, you pitch it, you get your resource heal, you get the counter charge or soul charge, normally counter charge, but yeah, you can search it with your Jelly Beans, you can search it with Mecha Trainer. You want to get as many into these as your hand as possible. You don't really play this in any other build that's not Hell Hard 8. Heal Guardians kind of crept out the resource heals, but I think it's still important to have this in the deck. Mecha Instructor. Now this card is insanely good. It's kind of the same way as Mecha Analyzer, where you get the same exact effect, but this is on a trigger. So in aggro decks, you really want this effect because you're able to bind cards, call cards, get their on-call skills off. You get to charge the soul if you're playing a really aggressive Verminous deck. Cards like, again, Gyro Slingers, Spike Bouncer are going to be spammed onto the field because of this card. You're able to get so many uses out of them, get so much soul. This is a very strong card for a lot of your aggro decks because it doesn't have to charge necessarily. So some of the new support we have, which is bottom decks a card for its cost, this can be very, very useful in those cases where you just need to get it onto the bottom to start a long chain. We got Devil Watch. Now this is another one of those resource engines. It's for greedier decks that really want to shove as much like power into their 1 through 3 slots, and then want their triggers to maybe have a bit more utility. That's where Devil Watch comes in. You can call it off of any of your skills, get your counter charge and soul charge so you can keep going. The important part is that it can boost to get the skill, so it doesn't need to always be attacking, which can be important because if you want to call it behind the Vanguard so you can counter charge and soul charge when you use the Vanguard attack, then put it back in. Either way, I still think Devil Watch can see some uses in Spikes. The card's very good. Just having access to multiple resources from it is very strong. Now, Silence Choker is a card I personally like using a lot. In resource-intensive decks, I want to use a lot of Soul and a lot of CB. This is like the perfect spot. because you're getting a soul and a counter charge just for putting it, obviously into the soul. So you're sacrificing one hand for 2 of those resources, which in combo-centric decks or decks that are really just trying to spike your opponent, this is really useful. Being able to drop your hand to just commit to a full board, or maybe if your opponent denies you, have access to use your hand to get away from that, play that they're making. So very strong card. Could be very good in multiple different instances. And then Lyre Lips, you can play, if you're playing like a Barrow Magnus Rising Nova deck and you want as many cards that go into the soul as possible, you're going to want to play this because it goes into the soul and draws you cards, so it replaces itself. It's a 5k trigger, but if you're playing Barrow Magnus, you're playing a deck that wants to sack your opponent anyway, so why not go for it? And then onto grade 0s that aren't triggers, we have Chiro Franny. This is like a resource engine. You can recycle cards back to your deck, you get the soul and get a counter charge. In premium, your deck space is a bit too tight to be playing this, but I think it can merit some use if you do have a deck that maybe isn't playing that many, can sacrifice a copy of a grade 1 or a copy of a grade 2 and play this at like 2, so you can just search it out and use it act whenever. Can be okay, but in most circumstances it's not that great. Now onto the grade 1s, I'm going to go ahead and start with Wonder Boy. Now Wonder Boy has basically been a staple since it first got released. The card is just really strong. You're able to recycle a lot of cards into your deck, get a lot of power, and then thin your deck while getting a lot of soul from its skill. Unfortunately, it is weak to getting retired, but if you're putting it into the front row and it gets attacked, I believe that is a misplay that you are making. If you're putting this in the back and you're using it to filter, thin, as well as recycle cards into the deck, I think that's still a very strong card, especially in decks like Hellheart 8, which want to reuse like cards like Breach Spurt and Barrel. This is a very strong card. Commander Gary Gannon, it's one of the best filters in Spikes. It's probably the best filter card in probably the whole clan, and it fills your soul. So when you boost the hits, you get a draw 2, put a card from hand on the bottom of your deck, so you're seeing 2 fresh cards. You can put away a brick, which can be very strong. It can actually get you out of so many bad situations. By seeing those fresh 2 cards and putting away, say, a grade 3 that's useless, you're able to just fix your hand and maybe just ends up popping off the next turn, or even that turn. Say you're playing the card like Villain Verminous, you're going to be drawing into your cards that can need to hit. So this could be very good. I think this card overall is just that one grade 1 where like, I'm not sure what grade 1 to play, I'll just play a few copies of Ganon, it'll be pretty good. Now Ted, this is kind of the same lines as Wonder Boy. You get a bit more power and you can't put away triggers, but again, you do get a little bit more power, and yeah, it's okay. I think Wonder Boy does edge this out a little bit. Some people play it in Hellheart 8, some people play Wonder Boy in Hellheart 8. It really depends on your play style. I think Wonder Boy is a bit better, but yeah, it's still a valid option if you want to play this in Hellheart 8. Pioneer, this is one of the most aggressive cards you can play because you're using a bunch of soul to just draw a bunch of cards and put as much aggression onto your opponent as possible. You're losing your soul for a lot of plussing, and I believe that can be worth if you're playing a deck like Bad End Dragger, which is going to generate a lot of soul anyway because you're rewriting multiple times. Yeah, this card overall can be very good. It gets itself back to the deck, you draw some cards, you get extra power, it can be very good. Air Force Eliza, now this is charge support, which can be very good. Villain Verminous needing to hit is one of the weaknesses of the deck. Of course, Villain Verminous says when the card is guarded, you could call a card from hand. So if your opponent's at 2 or 3, they can just take the hit from the force marker and you don't get your chain off. Air Force Eliza, what it does is if you're playing a charge package in your deck, you can counterblast, bind the call, and recall it, charge it again, and then pretty much don't have to let it hit, or you can call it to a different circle and then you can pressure with that rearguard somewhere else. This is also a 7k, which can swing under, and it can't be swung under by decks that are running 7k grade 1s, which can be very important. Overall, I think this card's very good, and it's like one of the reasons you can run a good charge engine. Gyro Slinger. Now, this is one of the best combo cards in your deck. You are getting so many binds and calls and so many superior calls from the deck in your stride game, or so many superior calls from hand, that this card is able to just pop off so often. Every single turn you can use this 1 to 2 to 3 times in your battle phase. Keep cards flowing into your soul, keep cards flowing off the top of the deck. You are going through so many cards, stacking so many triggers into the bottom of your deck, and you're just abusing cards like, again, Mecha Instructor, Mecha Analyzer by binding and calling. You're abusing cards like Villain Verminous by calling it down, putting a card in the soul, replacing that cost that you use to call it out, and you get to call another fresh card, or even get 2 attackers with it. So you could call this on the Force 1-2, and then call it somewhere else, and then this can pressure your opponent, and that can pressure your opponent. There's a lot of instances where this card is very, very strong, and in Premium especially, since you could call it mid-battle, it can be very, very abusable. Yeah, and again, decks like Bad End really want this. Decks like Agris really want this. A lot of decks that just bind and call really want this card. It's very, very strong. Acrobat Verity V. Grade 3 searchers are always very strong, especially in Spike Brothers where you are playing Rising Nova, so you want us access to as many grade 3s as possible since you are playing like a toolbox. You can get very easy power gains with a decent attacker, and of course searches grade 3s, which is enough to justify a spot in your deck. And Acrobat Verity G, it finds Rising Nova for you. So with heal guards, these cards become a lot better because your strike fighters now have 4 extra targets to just reveal, so you can hit on your grade 3s. Very, very good. Again, 7k, you swing under, very strong. And of course, that is a stride fodder, so you can have maybe a little bit more flexibility in your trigger lineup. Say you want to run more soul crits instead of stride crits because you're running the stride fodder. It can be very strong, but again, you're never really complaining about having too much stride fodder. Ambush Dexter. Now, this card is probably the best grade 1 in the clan. It's probably one of the best cards in the clan aside from Rising Nova himself. This card is insane. So it has a decent Vanguard skill where you can just get a cycle, very good. And then its second skill is when it's placed on rear, counterblast 1, put a grade 2 or greater important card into your soul, switch your deck up for 2 cards of the same grade, and call them. Now, this is insanely strong because it doesn't specify the same name, it doesn't specify anything. All you have to do is put a grade 2 in soul and get +1 of those cards. So it could be anything. So you can put a grade 2 in soul and call 2 brackies, get 20k. You're going to swing at your opponent heavy. You're going to get 2 cards that have combo pieces, 2 charge units, 2 whatever. This is going to be very, very strong in so many cases, especially in spikes, which again could bind and call during the battle phase, which this card was not intended to do, obviously. And it's going to get so many calls off. Again, any deck that could search this out, grab it to hand, and hold them for your combo turns, you're going to be getting so much value out of this. Especially in other decks where it's like, it's filtering out anything you need for your full combo. It's not once per turn, so every single time you see it, it's going to be live. A lot of your stuff doesn't have charge anymore, so it's not leaving the board, so you can just attack with a bracket for 20k, call 2 more brackies, or call a couple breach spurts, draw a bunch of cards, whatever. This card is insane. I can't say enough that if you're playing spikes, this is almost an immediate 4 of slotted, and once your deck is like super specifically tight to be a certain combo or a certain level of deck, that this card won't sneak in as a 4 of. It might sneak in as a 3 of, but it will be in the deck. This card is so strong. Machine Gun Gloria V. Now this card is actually fairly strong because it is a field plus, so you're counterblasting getting it onto the field. So in cases where you're really needing to have as many cards that gain value like this as possible, this is very strong. It clears a lane, which can be very important for cards like Dirty Picaro. It can be very important for cards like Villain Verminous because you're sending resources back into your deck. It draws you cards, so it gets extra chains, so you can keep going off. And then bot deck skills, and it can be very, very important because your cards like, again, Mecha and Instructor or Mecha Analyzer, if you don't have a charging unit, sometimes you can't proc those. Machine Gun Gloria now gives you a way to proc those cards without having to spend CB or use charge cards or use counterblast like cards like Bad End Dragger, the V card. This is very strong, and especially being able to bind and call something else out, now you're able to really use those cards effectively. And Emperor Reverse, if we do find some builds that are very strong with Emperor Reverse, this is just probably the best grade 1 partner for that card. It is very, very strong. This card can be very good in a lot of different decks. The synergy is there, the power level is there. It's all about kind of tuning your deck and saying, okay, how do I put Gloria in my list to make it strong, and what strides do I want to focus on to make that card strong? I think it's still a very good card. I'm going to go about Concealed Angela. It's just, again, kind of with Ted, a very easy power gain effect if you're really just trying to use a bunch of attacks and get a bunch of free power without having to spend too much CB. Very good for that. Then we have Cheergirl Elza. Limit Break Enabler. Very important for a couple cards in this clan which do require Limit Break to be very strong, which are the Bad End Dragger Break Ride and the Deadly Lucifer G, the Limit Break card, which is put a card from rear into soul, which can be very, very disgusting with the agreed on grade 1 Goman. This card is like very, very crucial, and that's why I brought up a card like Mecha Trainer. If you're running a deck that wants to focus around this and you have Mecha Trainer, you can just search this out, call it, and you can only have to run 1 of it. You don't have to commit really hard to it, but it's one of those things where it's like it's a combo piece. So since we have a deck card like Mecha Trainer in this deck and in these clan, we can be very specific about what text we want to play, and then we can play a card like this with other cards that can search it out, and then play a Limit Break card and copy with Nova or right on top of it. Anything you can want, this card can do. Sugar Courtney. Now this is one of the more interesting combo extension cards, because if your card has no face up, if your damage zone has no face up cards, you can countercharge. So on cards like Villain Verminous, maybe on cards like Agrius, where you're counterblasting to kind of call it out and get multiple countercharges out of it, it can be very strong in certain circumstances. So again, if you're playing a greedy deck which wants to counterblast a lot, and you really are going to need cards like this to kind of refund those counterblasts, so you could use a card like Ambush Texture again, this could be a very good inclusion in this decks. We got Desire Devil Bubetsu. Now this is a great combo piece for cards like Violence Ace. It's a great combo piece for cards like Lucifer V, for Greedon. Any of those that can suck up a card from your Vanguard Seal into the Soul. You can counterblast one, call a card from your hand, which could be anything like Ronaldo or whatever, and generate some more multis. It's a very good combo piece for cards like that, and it's definitely a build around you have to see once that form comes out. But I think it could be a very strong card because you're extending a lot of attacks past what the actual Vanguard skills can do. So very good. Then we have Dudley Daisy. Now this is just a very good Dudley extender. Anytime Davy can call a card, it can call Daisy. Daisy can call a grade 3, so it could be like a Lucifer, or it could be an Emperor. You can get a counter charge off of it. You can get extra 5k power off of it. Soul Blast 1 is it's a cost in this deck because we do have Villain Verminous. But if you're playing a deck like Pure Dudleys and you're on Dudley Geronimo, this could be a very strong card for just extending extra multis, because you're going to get power from Emperor, you're going to get power from Geronimo. It's going to go back into the deck and you can kind of reuse it. I think this card is very strong in the most part. And then the Rising Nova Greedon deck, it is of course a core combo piece. So yeah, very important card. Dudley William, marker moving can be very impactful, especially if you are playing a deck that is focused on the Vanguard. You want the markers on your Vanguard circle for the first couple turns. You can just use this, put it into the Soul, move the markers away, and you have a rearguard centric turn, which I think is very strong, because a card like Dudley Mason, the V version, is not a card you want to play, because it doesn't do anything else. This generates Soul and it moves your markers at the same time, and that can be very good for also dodging really bad plays, like your say you're playing against Kagero and you know they have a heal in hand, so you attack with your Dudley William boosting your whatever on your Force 1, Force 2. They denial Griffin it so you don't get your effect off. You can push it into the Soul, move it to your other circles. That way you can still get off a card like your Villain Verminous, which is the most important card in RG Zone. Yeah, overall this card's very strong, generating Soul. Again, it's very good for Villain Verminous, and moving markers is also very strong. Then we got Evil Eye of Prohibition, Quen Lu. This is Silent Tom Guard Restrict, which is, it's different. It's not Silent Tom. It's a little bit stronger than Silent Tom because it cannot call heal guards, which can be very important. So with cards like Spiking Cyclone, which can constantly restand a card that has this effect on a Force 1, Force 2, you could really cheese your opponent out if, say, they only draw their relics and heal guards as defensive tools. You could just put this in and then you're swinging at them with a 20, 30, 40, 50k rear guard that is restanding a couple times with a couple crits. This can be very funny with that. It is very cheesy, but actually can be a build that you can work towards once we start getting better soul charge options. That could be very strong, because again, anything that Dark States gets that can soul charge can be another card that we can put in this arsenal to make something like this a lot stronger. Desire Devil Goman, I think having Battle or Morfessa skill in Spike Brothers is strong enough. This card is really disgusting. Anytime that we have a stride, we have to make sure it doesn't suck up a card with the Vanguard ability, because this card is going to be disgusting if it does. We have Frog Raider. Now this card is essential for charge decks. Any deck that wants to be based around charge needs this card as a 3-of or a 4-of, probably a 3-of. This card is very, very strong with anything that pumps power. It gets you so many attacks. It gets you anything that can need to be boosted. This could also provide it. So say you attack with your Vanguard, you check 2 triggers, you stack them on the Frog Raider, you have a 27k booster anytime a charge unit comes in front of this, and it's very, very strong. And again, I think Miracle Ace is still a very strong card, and it's actually worth building your deck for a charge-centered deck based around it. Is it going to be tier 1? Probably not, but the cards are strong enough to be a good spot, and this Frog Raider is an essential player in those decks. Then we have Fake Bomber. It is a call and counter charge from him. So if you are playing like a Villain Verminous deck, this will work as kind of like the Villain Verminous, because you're Soul Blasting 2, you're getting a counter charge. So instead of drawing a card, you're getting a counter charge. Overall, it's just very strong because it is just Rise Nova restricted. It can be very good in those circumstances. Brainwash Twirler. So this card is actually interesting. Since it soul charges on call, you basically get plus 5,000 the turn it's called. And so anything else that you want to soul charge, say you want to play some of the cards I'm going to go into, you can pump this card to be very, very big to start restanding on that Force 1, Force 2. That could be really funny. And with Quen Lu, this card is going to be a, 10k, getting plus 5 for every time you soul charge. Again, it's going to be a very cheesy deck, but it's one of those things that, you're going to be playing this because it is soul charging for Villain Verminous. It's going to be soul charging extra cards when you call it. Yeah, it can be very strong. That's why I put Gungram in the list. It just soul charges 1. Currently, I think anything that you could play that soul charges a card, you can maybe put in that build. I think these cards, as we get better soul charging options, are going to fade way out. They're grade 1 5Ks. They don't do anything else other than soul charge. Same thing with Medical Manager. They don't do anything other than soul charge, so they're not the best. But if you're building a deck that is focused around, say, dropping Spoiler, putting Quen Lu on it, copying Spiking Cyclone, and just trying to kill them with that, really cheesy card restrict, these are the options that you want to put in your deck, because that could be a really funny way to kill your opponent very early in the game. Then we have the additional PG option of Recusal Hate Dragon. I believe this is probably the best other PG option. The other grade 1 PGs don't do as much. When you have a low hand, it's just very strong. And now on to Cray Elementals. I put pretty much all of them here just as a brief overview of what you can use in the spikes. So first we got Hoem. If you really need damage, here you go. Yeah, Mistoff. If you're just searching it out and placing it just to have a not guard restrict, but a hand size limit for your opponent, can be very strong if they're a deck that farms a lot of hand and you want to get in to kill them, because spoiler alert, 8 cards is not good to guard Verminous with. So if you have a way to get into it, maybe this is a very cute card that you can play down. And well, it is very cute, but a very interesting tech that you could play to kind of solidify a kill on your opponent. Tier, since we are a deck that is going to be using a card like Linus, as I have 3 of in most lists, you're flipping up Cray Elementals like crazy, so this can be a very good option to get a lot of counter charging. Say you're playing a super wombo deck that's not worried about villain, it's more worried about a different stride, then this can be perfect. Connell, basically just for playing around disruptive G-Guards and disruption in general. If you're really scared about getting locked or really scared about getting board wiped or something like that, you could have a card that could choose as many times as possible. You can save 1 to 2 units, can be very good. Then we got Poker. If you're playing against Link Joker, if your local meta is very Link Joker heavy, this can be very strong. I think if you are playing against Link Joker anyways, I think playing Poker in your deck is really not going to help you much, but it is there if you need it. And then Relic, if you are struggling at surviving early, getting aggroed out, again, it's another good option. The card is very strong. So that is the grade 1 section. I know there's a lot of cards to go over, but yeah, next part will be grades 2s and 3s. I'm going to try and get this out within the next 2 weeks. It's going to be very hard because I do have more deck profiles. I have another video coming out I'm recording today that is just based on V, and it's 4 decks alone. It's going to take me a little bit to talk about. So I'm going to be working on this next video. Stay tuned, pay attention, because I'm going to be dropping it. And guys, thanks for watching. Peace out.